You cannot sit still anymore. Not really. Even when your body is motionless, something inside you is pacing. Your thumb moves across glass. Your mind flicks between tabs you didn't mean to open. Your breath is shallow, caught somewhere between your chest and your throat. And you've forgotten when it became normal to breathe this way, as though you're always bracing for something just out of view. There was a bench once, in a place you never visited, where elders sat without hurry. You didn't know them. You don't even know where this bench was, not exactly. It might have been at the edge of a village square, or beneath a tree that had outlived 3 generations, or facing a dirt road that led nowhere urgent. But you know it existed. You know because you can feel the absence of it, the way you feel the absence of a word you can't remember, is a word that sits just behind your tongue, necessary and lost. They sat there, those elders, and they watched. They watched the day pass. They watched children scatter and return. They watched clouds build and dissolve. They watched the same dog cross the same path at the same time, and they noted it, not with words, but with the quiet attention of people who understood that witnessing was a kind of work. They were not waiting for anything in particular. They were not killing time. Time moved through them, and they let it, the way a river moves through reeds. You don't sit like that now. No one does. When you sit, you are interrupted by the fear that you should be doing something else. You are interrupted by notifications, by the silent accusation of an empty inbox, by the possibility that somewhere, someone is getting ahead. You sit. But you are not present. You are skimming the surface of the moment, eyes darting, mind racing, patience worn thin as paper. And you wonder, sometimes, where that patience went. Not your personal patience, though that's eroded too, but the collective patience, the cultural capacity to sit and witness without the need to optimize, to commodify, to extract. You wonder where we place our patience now that no one sits to watch the passing day. You wonder if it's stored somewhere, archived like old photographs, or if it's simply gone, dissolved into the speed of modern life like sugar into water. The bench is a metaphor, of course, you understand that. But it's also more than a metaphor. It was a real place, a physical point in space where people gathered not to transact or perform, but simply to be seen and to see. It was a place of intergenerational belonging, where the old and the young occupied the same temporal plane, where the rhythm of one life could be measured against the rhythm of another. The elders sat because they had earned the right to rest, but also because their sitting served a purpose. They were the witnesses. They were the memory. They were the ones who could say, "This happened before," or "This too shall pass," or simply, "I see you." And now the elders are elsewhere. They are in assisted living facilities with fluorescent lights and scheduled activities. They are in retirement communities designed to keep them comfortable and separate. They are in their own homes, alone, watching television, scrolling through tablets, trying to learn the language of a world that has moved on without them. They are not on the bench. There is no bench. The square is empty, or it's been turned into a parking lot, or it's filled with people moving too quickly to notice who might be sitting still. You feel this absence even if you never experienced the presence. You feel it as a low hum of disconnection, a sense that something fundamental has been misplaced. You scroll through images of other people's lives and feel more alone than if you'd spent the day in silence. You attend events designed for connection and leave feeling like a ghost. You achieve things, accumulate things, optimize things, and still there's this hollow space inside you, this feeling that you are untethered, floating, that no one is watching, that no one is holding the thread of your story in their hands. This is not about romanticism. This is not about pretending the past was easier or better or less brutal. The elders who sat on that bench knew hunger. They knew loss. They buried children. They survived wars and plagues and famines that would break you in half. Their hands were gnarled from work you can't imagine. Their bodies ached with labors that started before dawn and ended after dark. They were not living in some pastoral paradise. They were living in the same messy, painful, contradictory world that humans have always inhabited. But they had a place, they had a role, they had a bench. You have productivity, you have efficiency, you have the ability to communicate with anyone, anywhere, at any time. And yet you are lonelier than people who lived their entire lives within a 10-mile radius. You have more information than any generation in history, and yet you feel less certain, less grounded, less able to say with confidence, "This is who I am, and this is where I belong." The bench was not just a piece of wood, it was an architecture of patience. It was a place where time moved differently, where the metric of a day was not tasks completed or emails answered, but simply the quality of attention you could bring to the unfolding present. The elders who sat there were not passive. They were not doing nothing. They were engaged in the ancient practice of bearing witness, of holding space, of being available to the moment without needing to colonize it with action. And the young people, the children who played in the square, the adolescents who tested boundaries, the adults who hurried past with their burdens and their plans, they were seen. They were held in the gaze of people who had lived long enough to know that most urgency is illusion, that most crises pass, that the arc of a life is long and strange and cannot be rushed. The elders didn't need to say much. Their presence was the message. Their patience was the teaching. You don't have that now. You have self-help books and therapy apps and meditation subscriptions, all of which are good, all of which have value, but none of which replace the simple fact of being witnessed by someone who has walked the path before you, who has survived what you fear might kill you, who can sit beside you without needing to fix or solve or optimize, who can simply say, through their presence, "You are not alone in this." Where do we place our patience now? We place it in queues and loading bars. We place it in the hope that the next upgrade will finally satisfy us. We place it in the future, always the future, in the belief that once we achieve this goal or acquire that thing or reach that milestone, then we'll be able to rest. Then we'll be able to sit without the gnawing anxiety that we're wasting time. But the future never arrives. The goalpost moves. The definition of enough expands, and the bench remains empty. You were not raised to sit on that bench. You were raised to move, to strive, to improve. You were told that stillness is stagnation, that patience is passivity, that the only way to survive in this world is to stay ahead, to keep running, to never let them see you rest. And so, you run. You run until your legs ache and your lungs burn, and you can't remember why you started running in the first place. You run until you forget that there was ever another way to be. But sometimes, late at night, when the notifications finally quiet and the demands recede and you're left alone with the sound of your own breathing, you remember. You remember something you never experienced. You remember the bench. You remember the feeling of being held in someone's patient gaze, of being part of a continuum, of knowing that your restlessness is not a personal failing, but a symptom of a world that has forgotten how to sit still. This is not nostalgia. Or rather, it is nostalgia, but not the kind that wants to return to the past. It's the kind that recognizes what has been lost in the race toward progress. It's the kind that mourns not the past itself, but the sense of belonging that came from moving at a human pace, and from being embedded in a web of relationships that spanned generations, from knowing that your life was visible, that it mattered, that someone was keeping watch. The elders on the bench were not sentimental. They did not speak in platitudes about the good old days. They knew the days were never all good. They knew that every era has its cruelties, its injustices, its failures. But they also knew something you're struggling to learn, that a life needs witnesses, that a community needs memory, that patience is not the absence of action, but the foundation of sustainable existence. You live in a world that has optimized away the margins, the pauses, the spaces between. You live in a world that treats attention as a commodity and time as a resource and presence as a luxury you can't afford. You live in a world that has no place for the bench, no patience for the elders, no tolerance for the slow work of simply watching the day pass. And you are exhausted. You are so tired of running. You are so weary of the performance, the optimization, the endless cycle of achievement and anxiety. You want to stop. You want to sit. You want someone to tell you it's okay, that you don't have to keep proving your worth, that your value is not measured in productivity or visibility or the number of people who double tap your curated moments. But there is no bench. There are no elders. There is only you, alone with your phone, scrolling through the simulacrum of connection, trying to find in the digital ether what could only ever be found in physical presence, in patient witnessing, in the slow accumulation of shared time. So you build your own version. You create routines that mimic stability. You curate feeds that simulate community. You practice mindfulness as though presence were a skill you could master through repetition, as though the ability to sit still was something you could download and install. And these things help. They do. They give you moments of relief, brief windows where the anxiety recedes and you remember what it feels like to breathe deeply, to notice the world around you, to exist without the constant hum of should be doing. But they're not the bench. They're not the same. Because the bench was not about you managing your own mental health. It was about being part of something larger, something intergenerational, something that existed before you and would continue after you. It was about knowing your place in the continuum, not as an individual optimizing their personal experience, but as a thread in a fabric, a note in a song, a life witnessed and held by others. This is what you're missing. This is the ache beneath the anxiety, the longing beneath the loneliness. You don't just want to feel better. You want to belong. You want to be seen. You want to know that your presence matters, not because you've achieved something or produced something or performed something, but simply because you are here, because you are part of the story, because someone is watching, someone is remembering, someone is holding space for you to exist without needing to justify that existence. And you can't buy that. You can't optimize it. You can't achieve it through willpower or discipline or the right combination of supplements and sleep schedules. You can only receive it, and it can only be given by people who have learned to sit still, who have cultivated the patience to watch without needing to intervene, who understand that the most radical act in a world of constant motion is to bear witness without agenda. The bench is gone. You know this. You can't bring it back. The world has changed in ways that make that kind of unhurried presence nearly impossible. The economic structures don't support it. The cultural values don't reward it. The technological infrastructure actively undermines it. You cannot simply return to a way of being that no longer has a place in the architecture of modern life. But you can grieve it. You can acknowledge the loss. You can name the absence. And in naming it, you can begin to understand why you feel the way you do, why the restlessness won't quiet, why the achievements never satisfy, why you're always looking for something you can't quite articulate. You miss the bench. You miss the elders. You miss being held in the patient gaze of people who had lived long enough to know that your urgency is temporary, that your crisis will pass, that you are more than your productivity, more than your anxiety, more than the sum of your accomplishments and failures. You miss having a place in the world that didn't require constant justification. You miss the feeling of being rooted, of being part of something that moved at a human pace, of knowing that someone was watching, not to judge or evaluate, but simply to see, to remember, to hold the story. And now you're here, in the dark, in the quiet, in this liminal space between sleep and waking, and you're wondering if there's a way forward, if there's a way to carry the spirit of the bench into a world that has no physical space for it, if there's a way to cultivate patience in a culture of speed, to practice witnessing in an age of distraction, to build belonging in a landscape of isolation. The answer is not simple. It's not a technique or a strategy or a 5-step plan. It's something older and slower, something that requires you to unlearn the lessons of productivity and relearn the lessons of presence, to trade the currency of achievement for the currency of attention, to accept that some things cannot be rushed or optimized or improved. They can only be lived. But before we go there, before we explore what might be possible, we need to go back further. We need to understand what the bench represented, not as a romantic symbol, but as a real practice embedded in real lives. We need to understand what it meant to be an elder, what it meant to sit and watch, what it meant to hold the memory of a community in your body, your bones, your patient gaze. Because you cannot grieve what you don't understand, and you cannot build something new until you've fully comprehended what was lost. So let's go back. Not to escape, but to remember. Not to romanticize, but to witness. Let's go back to a time when patience was not a personal virtue, but a communal necessity. When the elders sat on the bench because that's where they belonged, and everyone knew it, and no one had to explain why. Imagine a life where your value increased with age, where the older you became, the more essential your presence, where wrinkles were not something to hide, but evidence of wisdom earned through survival, where your slowing body was not a liability, but a signal that you had graduated to a different kind of work, one that required stillness rather than motion, observation rather than action, memory rather than innovation. This was not universal. Let's be clear about that. There were cultures that abandoned their elderly, that saw old age as burden, that valued youth and strength above all else. Human history is not a simple story of respect and reverence. It's messy and contradictory and often cruel. But there were also places, many places, where the elders held a position that is almost incomprehensible to you now, where their presence was not tolerated but treasured, where the community organized itself around their needs and their knowledge. The bench was one expression of this. It was a physical manifestation of a social contract. We will care for you in your old age, and in return, you will be present. You will watch. You will remember. You will hold the story when we're too busy planting or harvesting or building to carry it ourselves. The elders did not sit there all day, every day. They had other work. They mended tools. They prepared food. They tended to the sick. But they also had time, real time, unhurried time, to simply be present in the communal space. And this presence mattered in ways that are hard to articulate now, in ways that didn't show up on any ledger or produce any measurable output, but that held the community together nonetheless. When a child ran through the square, i.e. chasing a ball, or fleeing from a sibling, or simply burning off the wild energy of youth, the elders saw. They didn't intervene unless necessary. They didn't judge. They simply witnessed. And the child, even in the midst of play, knew they were being seen. Not surveilled, not monitored, but seen. Held in a gaze that was neither critical nor indifferent, but simply present. When a young couple walked by, nervous with new love or heavy with the burden of her argument, the elders saw. They might nod, they might smile, they might say nothing at all, but their presence communicated something essential. You are not the first to feel this way. You will survive it. This too is part of the pattern. When a parent struggled, exhausted from the demands of young children, or the weight of responsibility, or the fear that they were failing at something fundamental, the elders saw. And sometimes, without being asked, they would offer a hand, or a story, or simply the reminder that they had once been exactly where that parent was, and they had made it through, and so would this one. The bench was not about giving advice, though sometimes advice was given. It was not about judgment, though the elders certainly had opinions. It was about creating a stable point in a world of motion, a place where the rushing current of daily life could eddy and pool, where people could pause, however briefly, and remember that they were part of something larger than their immediate concerns. You don't have this. Your elders are not in the square. They're not at the center of your life. They're peripheral, cordoned off, managed by institutions or family members who are themselves too busy to sit still. You might call them on holidays. You might visit when guilt becomes unbearable. But you don't see them daily. You don't pass through their patient gaze as a regular part of your existence. You don't have the benefit of their witnessing, and they don't have the dignity of their role. Instead, you have influences. You have algorithms. You have curated feeds of people who are paid to appear wise, to offer guidance, to simulate the presence of someone who cares about your well-being. And some of them are genuine. Some of them offer real value. But they cannot see you. They cannot witness your specific life. They cannot hold your individual story in the web of community memory. They can only broadcast, and you can only receive, and the exchange is fundamentally unequal, fundamentally disconnected from the reciprocal relationship that made the bench meaningful. The elders on the bench were not influencers. They were not trying to build a following or monetize their wisdom. They were simply doing what old people did in a world that had a place for old people. They were being present, they were watching, they were available. And this availability was not passive. It required a kind of active patience that you've almost forgotten how to practice. It required the ability to sit with discomfort without needing to fix it, to witness pain without needing to solve it, to hold space for complexity without needing to simplify it. The elders had learned, through decades of living, that most problems solve themselves if given enough time, that most crises are not as urgent as they feel in the moment, that the best gift you can give someone in distress is not advice, but presence. This wisdom came at a cost. It came from surviving things that should have killed them. It came from burying people they loved. It came from enduring famines and plagues and wars and all the ordinary brutalities of human existence. Their patience was not innate. It was earned. It was the scar tissue of a life lived long enough to see patterns, to recognize cycles, to understand that nothing lasts forever. Not the good, not the bad, not the unbearable. You romanticize this sometimes. You imagine that if you'd lived then, you would have been one of the wise ones, sitting calmly on the bench, offering gentle guidance. But you wouldn't have. You would have been anxious and exhausted and overwhelmed just like you are now. You would have struggled with the same fundamental questions about meaning and purpose and whether you were doing it right. The difference is not that they had answers you don't have. The difference is that they had a structure that held their anxiety, a community that absorbed their restlessness, a role that gave their presence meaning. The bench gave the elders a job: witness, hold memory, be available. And in having that job, they had dignity. They had purpose. They had a reason to get up in the morning that wasn't about productivity or achievement, but about showing up, about being part of the fabric, about fulfilling a role that only they could fulfill because only they had lived long enough to see the patterns, to remember the stories, to embody the continuity. Your elders don't have this job. Retirement, in your world, is supposed to be freedom. It's supposed to be the reward for decades of labor. And in some ways, it is. But it's also exile. It's also the moment when you become economically irrelevant, culturally invisible, structurally unnecessary. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to travel and golf and finally read all those books. And some people do. Some people thrive in the freedom, but many don't. Many feel the absence of purpose like a physical ache. Many wake up every day wondering what they're for, now that they're no longer producing, no longer contributing, no longer needed in any way that the world recognizes as valuable. This is not an accident. This is the logical outcome of a culture that measures worth in economic terms, and that sees people as resources to be used and discarded, that has no place for those who cannot or will not participate in the machinery of production and consumption. Your elders are not on the bench because there is no bench. And there is no bench because witnessing has no market value, because patience cannot be monetized, because the work of holding memory and bearing witness does not show up on quarterly reports. And so, they sit alone, in front of screens, scrolling through the same feeds you scroll through, trying to stay relevant in a world that has moved on, trying to learn the language of a culture that speaks faster than they can follow. They are not witnesses. They are not memory keepers. They are consumers, increasingly frail consumers, a demographic to be marketed to and managed and eventually mourned. You feel the loss of this even if you don't consciously recognize it. You feel it in the anxiety that no one is watching, that no one cares, that your life is happening in a void. You feel it in the desperation for validation, for likes, for any signal that you exist, that you matter, that your presence registers somewhere. You feel it in the exhaustion of having to constantly prove your worth, to justify your existence, to perform competence and capability and endless striving. Because there is no bench, because there are no elders, because there is no patient gaze holding you, reminding you that you are part of a story larger than yourself, that your restlessness is temporary, that you are seen. In the old structure, the one that built benches and put elders on them, patience was distributed across the community. And the young could afford to be restless because the old held the stillness. The workers could afford to rush because the elders maintained the calm. The anxious could afford to panic because the wise had seen it all before and could offer the reassurance of survival. It was an ecosystem of attention, a balanced distribution of temporal energy. Now everyone is rushing, everyone is anxious. Everyone is performing productivity and desperately seeking validation and trying to optimize their way to some imagined state of arrival. There is no calm. There is no center. There is no one holding the stillness while you figure out how to live. And you might think, well, that's the price of progress. That's what we gave up to gain autonomy and mobility and all the freedoms of modern life. And maybe that's true. Maybe there is no way to have both. No way to preserve the bench while also building the world you live in now. Maybe the loss was necessary, but it was still a loss. And you still feel it. The elders on the bench knew things you're having to relearn from scratch. They knew that a day has a rhythm, that energy ebbs and flows, that trying to maintain constant productivity is like trying to sprint a marathon. They knew that seasons change, that grief passes, that joy returns, that nothing stays the same. They knew that most of what feels urgent today will be forgotten tomorrow, and that the things that actually matter reveal themselves slowly over years, not in the frenzy of the moment. They knew this not because they were smarter or better, but because they had lived long enough to see the cycles repeat. They had watched children grow into adults, and adults grow into elders. They had seen marriages begin and end. They had witnessed the rise and fall of fortunes, the coming and going of fashions, the endless churning of human drama. And through it all, they had learned to sit still, to watch, to trust that most things resolve themselves if you give them time. This is not fatalism. It's not passivity. It's a different relationship to time, one that understands that not everything can be controlled, that not everything should be rushed, that some things only ripen in their own season. The elders had learned to tell the difference between problems that needed immediate action and problems that needed patient attention, between crises that were genuine and crises that were manufactured by anxiety. You're trying to learn this now, on your own, through trial and error and therapy and meditation apps. You're trying to cultivate the patience that used to be held for you by the elders on the bench. And it's hard. It's so much harder than it should be, because you're doing it alone, without models, without witnesses, without the reassurance that comes from being held in a web of intergenerational knowing. The bench was not just about the elders. It was about everyone who passed by, everyone who was seen, everyone who received the silent message that they were part of something continuous, something that existed before them and would continue after them. It was about knowing your place, not in a hierarchical sense, but in a temporal one. You were young, and then you were adult, and then, if you were lucky, you were old. And each stage had its role, its dignity, its place on the bench, or passing by the bench, or playing in front of the bench. Now, you have life stages, but they're not linked. They're isolated. Childhood happens in schools and scheduled activities. Adulthood happens in offices and apartments, and the digital space of work from home. Old age happens in retirement communities and nursing homes, and the peripheral vision of a culture obsessed with youth. You move through these stages, but you don't pass through each other's lives. You don't witness each other. You don't hold the continuity. And so each generation has to figure it out alone. The young don't have elders to reassure them that their anxiety is normal, that their questions have been asked before, that they will survive the confusion of becoming. The adults don't have elders to remind them that their striving is temporary, that their achievements will fade, that the metrics they're killing themselves over will seem laughable in retrospect. And the old don't have a role, don't have a bench, don't have the dignity of being needed for something only they can provide. Everyone is isolated in their own temporal bubble, convinced that their experience is unique, that their struggle is unprecedented, that no one understands. And maybe that's partly true. Every life is unique. Every struggle has its own flavour. But the fundamental patterns, the fundamental questions, the fundamental human experience of being alive in a body that ages and a world that changes, these are not new. These have been lived 1 billion times before. But you don't know that. You can't feel that. Because there is no bench. Because there are no elders. Because there is no one holding the memory, bearing witness, offering the silent reassurance of survival. And so, you search. You search for connection in digital spaces and curated feeds and the endless scroll of other people's highlight reels. You search for wisdom in books and podcasts and the algorithmically served content that promises to unlock the secret to a meaningful life. You search for belonging in communities organized around shared interests or identities or grievances, hoping that if you find the right group, the right label, the right tribe, you'll finally feel at home. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you find people who see you, who get you, who offer the witnessing you crave. But it's fragile. It's contingent. It's not embedded in the structure of your daily life the way the bench was embedded in the structure of the village square. It's something you have to actively maintain, actively choose, actively create over and over again. The bench required no effort. It was just there. The elders were just there. The witnessing happened, whether you sought it or not, simply by virtue of moving through the shared space of the community. You didn't have to earn it. You didn't have to perform for it. You didn't have to optimize your way to it. It was given freely as part of the basic architecture of belonging. This is what you've lost. This is what no amount of self-improvement can replace. Because the problem is not you. The problem is the absence of the bench, the absence of the elders, the absence of a structure that holds you without requiring you to constantly justify your worth. You are tired because you are holding yourself. You are anxious because you are witnessing yourself. You are lonely because you are trying to be your own elder, your own memory keeper, your own patient gaze. And you cannot do this. No one can. The weight is too much. The task is impossible. You are not meant to carry this alone. Let's go back further. Let's go back to the moment before the bench, to the moment when becoming an elder was not a retirement, but a transformation, a shift from one kind of work to another, from the work of the body to the work of presence. Imagine you are 50, 60, 70 years old in a time before medicine could mask the reality of aging. Your back hurts. Your knees ache. You cannot work the fields the way you once did. You cannot lift what you once lifted. You cannot move with the speed and strength that defined your younger years. As in a culture that values only productivity, only physical contribution, this would be the beginning of your irrelevance. But in a culture with a bench, this is the beginning of your most important work. You are transitioning. You are moving from the role of producer to the role of witness. And this transition is marked, recognized, honored. Your community does not discard you. They shift you. They give you a new place, a new purpose. They put you on the bench. At first, it might feel like exile. After decades of defining yourself through labor, through what you could do with your hands and your body, sitting still might feel like failure. You might resist. You might insist that you can still work, that you're not ready, that you have more to give in the old way. And maybe you do. Maybe you continue to contribute physically for years. But gradually, inevitably, your body makes the choice for you. And when it does, the bench is waiting. So you sit. And at first, you're restless. You watch others work and feel guilty. You watch younger people struggle with tasks you once mastered and want to intervene. You feel useless. You feel like you're wasting time, like you should be doing something, anything, other than sitting here while life happens around you. But then something shifts. Maybe it takes days. Maybe it takes months. But slowly, you begin to notice things you never noticed before. You begin to see patterns. You see that the young woman who rushes by every morning is carrying a worry that makes her shoulders tight. And you remember being her. Remember that particular flavor of anxiety. Remember that it passes. And you see that the child who plays in the square has a wildness that reminds you of your own child, now grown. And you feel a tenderness that has nothing to do with you. A tenderness that is simply the recognition of the human pattern repeating. You begin to understand that you are not doing nothing. You are doing something very specific. You are holding the space. You are maintaining the continuity. You are being the stable point around which the rushing life of the community can orient itself. And people begin to seek you out. Not for advice necessarily, though sometimes that, but for presence. For the reassurance that comes from being seen by someone who has survived, who has endured, who carries in their body the proof that life can be lived all the way to the end. They sit beside you, briefly, between tasks. They tell you things they wouldn't tell anyone else because you are not in the rush with them, because you have the patience to listen, because your gaze holds no judgment, only recognition. This becomes your work. This becomes your contribution. And it is not less valuable than what you did before. It is differently valuable. It is the work that can only be done by those who have slowed, who have aged, who have accumulated the kind of wisdom that comes not from study, but from survival. You begin to take pride in this. You begin to understand that the bench is not exile, but elevation. You are an elder now. You hold the memory. You are the witness. When decisions are made, your opinion matters, not because you have power, but because you have perspective. You have seen enough winters to know when to worry and when to trust. You have survived enough crises to know which ones are real and which ones are fear dressed up as urgency. The young still rush. The adults still strive. But you sit. And in your sitting, you hold something essential. You hold the knowledge that life is more than productivity, that a day is more than its tasks, that a human is more than their output. You hold this knowledge not in words, but in your body, in your stillness, in your patient gaze. And when you die, as everyone does, your place on the bench is taken by someone else, someone who has aged into the role, who has slowed enough to see, who is ready to hold the space you held. The bench continues. The witnessing continues. The memory continues. You are gone, but the structure remains. And your life, your specific life, is woven into the fabric of the community's story, held there by the people who witnessed you, who will tell the next generation about you, who will keep you alive in the only way that lasts. This is what you've lost. This is what retirement cannot replace. Because retirement is individual. It is an exit, not a transition. It is the end of your contribution, not the beginning of a new kind of work. It is leisure, earned through labor, but it is not purpose. It is not dignity. It is not the knowledge that you are essential, that your presence matters, that the community needs you specifically for something only you can provide. Your elders retire and then spend decades trying to figure out what they're for. They volunteer, they travel, they take up hobbies. And some of this brings joy. Some of this fills the time. But underneath it all is the question, what am I for now? What is my role? Where is my bench? And the answer, in your culture, is nowhere. There is no bench. There is no role. You are free, which is another way of saying you are untethered, which is another way of saying you are alone. The elders in the old structure were not free. They were bound by expectation, by duty, by the weight of community need. And maybe that was oppressive in some ways. Maybe it limited their choices. Maybe it constrained their ability to become something other than what the community needed them to be. But it also gave them something you cannot buy or achieve. It gave them a place. It gave them belonging. It gave them the knowledge that they mattered, that their presence was essential, that they would be missed if they were gone. You trade freedom for belonging and think you've won. And maybe you have, in some ways. Maybe the ability to choose your own path, to define your own purpose, to become whoever you want to be, is worth the loneliness, worth the anxiety, worth the constant question of whether you're doing it right. Maybe autonomy is the higher value. But late at night, when the choices have been made and the path has been walked and you're sitting alone with the sum of your decisions, you wonder. You wonder what it would feel like to know, without question, that you have a place. You wonder what it would feel like to be held in a structure that needs you, that sees you, that gives you a role you cannot fail at, because the role is simply to be present, to witness, to remember. You wonder what it would feel like to have a bench. The bench was not perfect. Let's be clear about that. The structure that created it was also the structure that limited women, that enforced hierarchies, that excluded outsiders, that punished deviation. The same community that honored its elders also policed its young, that sustained its members also controlled them, that provided belonging also demanded conformity. You cannot have the bench without the village. And the village came with costs you would not accept, should not accept, costs that involved the sacrifice of individual freedom for collective cohesion. The bench existed in a world where your life was not your own, where your choices were constrained by tradition and expectation, and the watchful eyes of people who had known you since birth and would judge you against standards you did not choose. So this is not an argument for return. This is not a call to rebuild the village and reinstall the bench and pretend that the modern world can be unwound. It can't. And even if it could, you wouldn't want it. You have tasted freedom. You have known the possibility of becoming something other than what your family or your community or your tradition expected. And that possibility, however isolating, however exhausting, is precious. But you can still grieve. You can still name the loss. You can still acknowledge that in gaining autonomy, you lost belonging, and that both are necessary, and that you have not yet figured out how to have them at the same time. The elders on the bench belonged. They had a place. They had a role. They were seen. But they were also constrained. They could not leave. They could not reinvent themselves. They could not question the structure without risking exile. Their belonging came at the cost of their freedom. You are free. You can leave. You can reinvent yourself. You can question everything. But your freedom comes at the cost of your belonging. You are unmoored. You are untethered. You are alone. And maybe this is the permanent trade-off. Maybe you cannot have both. Maybe the bench and the freedom are incompatible, and you must choose over and over which one you value more. But maybe not. Maybe there is a third way, something that honors the wisdom of the bench without requiring the constraints of the village, something that creates space for witnessing and memory and intergenerational presence without demanding conformity and control. Maybe you can build new structures, new rituals, but new ways of honouring the elders and holding the young, and creating the conditions for patient, sustained, reciprocal witnessing. Or maybe you can't. Maybe the bench was a product of specific material conditions, specific social arrangements, specific ways of life that cannot be recreated in a world of mobility and technology and individualism. Maybe the best you can do is understand what was lost, grieve it, and then figure out how to live in the world you actually inhabit. The world without benches. The world where everyone is rushing and no one is watching and patience has nowhere to land. But even if you can't recreate the bench, you can practice its spirit. You can slow down. You can witness. You can be present. You can offer your attention as a gift, freely given, without agenda. You can sit with people without needing to fix them. You can hold space without needing to fill it. You can embody, in your own small way, the patient gaze that the elders offered from the bench. This won't solve the structural problem. It won't give you back the intergenerational belonging you lost. It won't create the architecture that holds you without requiring you to hold yourself. But it might ease the ache. It might offer a moment of rest. It might remind you, and the people around you, that there was another way to be. And maybe, in small pockets, in brief moments, there still is. So, what do you do with this? What do you do with the knowledge of the bench, the memory of a thing you never experienced, the grief for a loss that predates your birth? You start by sitting still. Not because sitting still will solve anything, but because the restlessness itself is the problem. The constant motion, the endless striving, the inability to simply be without needing to do. This is the symptom of a culture that has forgotten the bench, that has no place for patient witnessing, that measures worth only in production and consumption. So you sit. You practice stillness. Not the optimized stillness of meditation apps and mindfulness programs, though those can help, but the older stillness, the stillness that expects nothing, that produces nothing, that simply is. The stillness of the elders on the bench, who sat not to achieve enlightenment or reduce stress or improve productivity, but because sitting was their work, their role, their contribution. You sit and you watch. You watch the day pass. You watch the light change. You watch the people move through their lives, rushing and striving and carrying their burdens. And you don't try to fix them. You don't try to advise them. You just see them. You bear witness. You hold space. This is harder than it sounds. You are trained to do. You are trained to solve. You are trained to be useful in measurable ways. Sitting and watching feels like waste. It feels like laziness. It feels like you should be doing something, anything, other than this. But you sit anyway. You sit through the discomfort. You sit through the guilt. You sit through the anxiety that whispers you're falling behind. You're wasting time. You're failing at the only game that matters. And slowly, maybe, you begin to notice what the elders noticed. You begin to see patterns. You begin to recognize the cycles. You begin to understand that most of what feels urgent today will be forgotten tomorrow, and that the things that actually matter reveal themselves slowly, quietly, in the spaces between the rushing. You won't become an elder this way. You can't. The role doesn't exist anymore. There is no bench, no community waiting for you to take your place. No structure that will honor your witnessing as valuable work. But you can carry the spirit of it. You can practice the patience of it. You can offer, to yourself and to the people around you, the gift of unhurried presence. And maybe, if enough people do this, if enough people resist the tyranny of productivity and reclaim the value of witness, something new will emerge. Not the old village, not the old bench, but something that serves the same function, something that creates space for intergenerational belonging, for patient attention, for the knowledge that you are seen, that you matter, that your life is held in the memory of a community. Or maybe not. Maybe the world has changed too much. Maybe the structures are too entrenched. Maybe individualism and mobility and technology have made the bench obsolete, a relic of a way of life that cannot and should not return. But even if that's true, even if the bench is gone forever, you can still grieve it. You can still name what was lost. You can still refuse to pretend that productivity is enough, that achievement is enough, that the endless accumulation of experiences and accomplishments and optimized moments will ever fill the space left by the absence of patient, sustained, reciprocal witnessing. You can still insist that you deserve to be seen, that your elders deserve to be honored, that patience is not a weakness, but a strength. That stillness is not waste, but work. That belonging is not a luxury, but a necessity. And you can still sit, you can still watch, you can still practice the ancient art of being present, of bearing witness, of holding space. Not because it will change the world, but because it will change you. And maybe, in changing you, it will change the small circle of people whose lives intersect with yours. And maybe, slowly, over time, those small changes will accumulate into something larger, something that resembles, however faintly, the world where the elders sat on the bench and watched the day pass, and knew, without question, that their presence mattered. This is not a solution. There is no solution. The bench is gone. The village is gone. The old structures of belonging are gone, and they are not coming back. And in trying to force them back would create new problems, new oppressions, new constraints that you would rightly reject. But you can still remember. You can still grieve. You can still practice. And in practicing, you can still resist, however quietly, the narrative that you are only as valuable as you are productive, that your worth is measured in achievement, that the only way to matter is to be seen by thousands or millions or whatever number the algorithm deems significant. You matter because you are here. You matter because you are alive. You matter because you are part of the human story, the long, strange, painful, beautiful story of people trying to figure out how to live together, how to care for each other, how to create meaning in a world that offers no guarantees and no easy answers. The elders on the bench knew this. They sat in that knowledge. They held it, not as an abstract principle, but as a lived reality, something they could feel in their bones, in their aching backs, in their patient gaze. You can know it too. Not the same way, not with the same certainty, not held by the same structures, but you can know it, you can feel it, you can practice it, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all you can do. Maybe that's all anyone has ever been able to do. Sit with the knowledge of their own impermanence, their own smallness, their own place in the vast continuum of human life, and choose, despite everything, to be present, to witness, to care. The bench is gone, but the spirit of the bench, the wisdom of the bench, the practice of the bench, these can remain. These can live in you. These can guide you as you navigate a world that has forgotten how to sit still, how to watch without judgment, how to hold space for the slow unfolding of a human life. So you sit, you watch, you witness, not because you will be rewarded, not because you will be recognized, not because it will solve the problem of loneliness or anxiety or the aching absence of intergenerational belonging. You do it because it is the work, because it is the practice, because it is the way you honor the elders who sat before you, who held the space, who witnessed the world. You do it because there is no bench, and so you must become the bench. You must hold yourself. You must witness yourself. You must be your own patient gaze, your own memory keeper, your own elder. And this is hard. This is so much harder than it should be. This is the work of a lifetime, maybe many lifetimes, and you will fail at it more often than you succeed. But you keep sitting, you keep watching, you keep practicing the patience that has nowhere else to land. Because the alternative is to keep rushing, to keep striving, to keep pretending that productivity will save you, that achievement will satisfy you, that the next milestone will finally give you the belonging you crave. And you know, deep down, that it won't. You know that the bench is gone, and no amount of success will bring it back. You know that you are living in a world that has traded belonging for freedom, that has chosen autonomy over community, that has dismantled the structures that held people in patient witness and replaced them with structures that demand constant performance, constant optimization, in constant proof of worth. You know this, and knowing it doesn't change it, but it does clarify it. It does give you a choice. You can keep running, or you can sit. You can keep striving, or you can witness. You can keep searching for the bench in the external world. Or you can build it, however imperfectly, however incompletely, in yourself. This is not the answer you wanted. You wanted a solution. You wanted a way to fix the loneliness, to ease the anxiety, to find the belonging that the modern world has made almost impossible. But there is no fix. There is only practice. There is only the choice, made over and over, to slow down, to sit still, to witness, to care. And maybe, in that practice, you find something. Not the bench, not the village, not the intergenerational belonging that your ancestors took for granted, but something. A moment of peace, a breath of stillness, a glimpse of the pattern, the cycle, the vast and patient unfolding of human life that continues generation after generation, whether or not anyone is watching. You are watching now. You are sitting now. You are bearing witness now. And that matters. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't bring back the bench, but it matters. It matters because you are here, because you are alive, because you are part of the story. And someone, somewhere, needs to remember that. Someone needs to hold the space. Someone needs to sit and watch and witness the passing day. It might as well be you. The light is different now. You've been here a while, in this space between waking and sleeping, between remembering and imagining, between the world as it is and the world as it was. The urgency has faded. The restlessness has quieted. Your breath has deepened, slowed, found a rhythm that doesn't strain. You can feel it, can't you? The way your shoulders have dropped, the way your jaw has unclenched, the way the tight knot in your chest has loosened. Just a little. Not because the problem is solved, not because the bench has been restored, but because you've stopped fighting it. You've stopped resisting the knowledge of what's been lost. And in that stopping, in that surrender, there's a kind of peace. It's not the peace of resolution. It's not the peace of answers. It's the peace of simply being with what is, without needing it to be different, without needing to fix it or solve it or optimize your way out of it. The elders on the bench knew this peace. They sat in it every day. They had no choice, really. Their bodies had slowed. Their lives had simplified. The urgency had been taken from them by age, by experience, by the accumulated knowledge that most urgency is illusion. You're not there yet. You may never be there. You may spend the rest of your life rushing and striving and trying to outrun the anxiety that whispers, "You're not enough. You're not doing enough. You're not being enough." But right now, in this moment, you can rest. You can let the rushing stop. You can let the striving pause. You can simply be here, in this quiet space, held by nothing but your own willingness to stop, to breathe, to let go. The bench is gone. You know this now. You've grieved it. You've named the loss. You've understood, as fully as you can, what it meant and what its absence costs. And now you can release it. You can let it go. Not because the grief is finished, but because holding on to it so tightly only makes you more restless, more anxious, more convinced that you can never rest until the world becomes something it will never be again. The world has changed. The structures have collapsed. The old ways of belonging are gone, and they are not coming back. This is the reality. This is what you must live with. But you are still here. You are still breathing. You are still part of the human story, the long, winding, heartbreaking, beautiful story of people trying to figure out how to live, how to love, how to bear the unbearable weight of being alive. And that story continues, with or without the bench, with or without the elders, with or without the patient witnessing that held people in their becoming. It continues in you, in your breath, in your stillness, in your willingness, however tentative, and to sit and watch and witness, even if only for a moment, even if only for yourself. This is enough. Right now, this is enough. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to rebuild the village or reinstall the bench or solve the problem of modern loneliness. You don't need to become enlightened or optimized or perfectly at peace. You just need to be here, breathing, present, willing to let the day pass without needing to fill it with productivity or achievement or proof that you matter. You matter because you are here. That's all. That's the whole truth. You matter because you exist, because you are alive, because you are part of this vast, incomprehensible, miraculous fact of existence. The elders knew this. They sat with this knowledge every day. They didn't need to prove it. They didn't need to justify it. They simply lived it, embodied it, held it in their patient gaze. You can hold it too. Not forever, not perfectly, but right now, in this moment, you can feel it. You can know it. You can rest in it. Your breath is slow now. Your body is heavy, sinking into whatever holds it. Your mind is quiet or quieter, the endless commentary fading into something softer, something more like silence. This is the place the elders inhabited. This is the space they held. Not a physical place, though the bench was physical, but a state of being, a way of existing in time, a practice of presence that didn't need to go anywhere or do anything or become anything other than what it already was. You can visit this place. You can return to it, not by going back to some lost past, not by rebuilding structures that cannot be rebuilt, but by remembering, by practicing, by choosing again and again to slow down, to sit still, to witness the passing day without needing to colonize it with action. This won't solve everything. It won't bring back the bench. It won't restore the intergenerational belonging you've lost. But it will give you moments. Moments of rest. Moments of peace. Moments where you remember that you are more than your productivity, more than your anxiety, more than the sum of your achievements and failures. You are a human being. You are alive. You are here. And someone, somewhere, is glad of that. Maybe it's the people who love you. Maybe it's the people whose lives you've touched without knowing it. Maybe it's the ancestors who sat on the bench and watched and witnessed and held the space, who passed that practice down through generations until it reached you, here, now, like in this moment. Or maybe it's just you. Maybe you're the one who's glad. Glad to be here. Glad to be alive. Glad to have stopped, however briefly, to remember what it feels like to simply be, without the need to prove or perform or justify your existence. That's enough. That's more than enough. The day is passing. You can feel it, can't you? The way the light shifts, the way the sounds change, the way time moves through you, patient and unhurried, asking nothing of you except that you let it pass. This is what the elders felt. This is what they witnessed. Not events or dramas or the urgent concerns of the moment, but the simple fact of time passing, of life continuing, of the world turning regardless of what any individual does or doesn't do. There's a comfort in this, a strange, unexpected comfort, because it means you don't have to carry it all. You don't have to hold the world together. You don't have to be endlessly productive or endlessly optimized or endlessly achieving. You can just be. You can just breathe. You can just let the day pass and trust that tomorrow will come, and the day after that, and the day after that. And you will continue, somehow, as people have always continued, through loss and grief, and the constant, aching absence of things that can never be recovered. You will continue, not because you're strong or brave or particularly resilient, but because continuing is what humans do. It's what your ancestors did. It's what the elders on the bench did, day after day, year after year, until their time came and someone else took their place. And you will do it too. You will wake up tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. You will carry your anxiety and your loneliness and your longing for belonging. You will struggle and strive and sometimes collapse under the weight of it all. But you will also have moments like this. Moments of rest. Moments of peace. Moments where you remember that the bench is gone, but the practice remains. And you can embody it, however imperfectly, however briefly. And those moments will sustain you. They will remind you that there's another way to be, another pace to move at, another metric for a life well lived that has nothing to do with productivity or achievement or the endless accumulation of proof that you matter. You matter because you breathe, because you witness, because you are here. The elders are gone. The bench is gone. The old structures of belonging are gone, but you remain, breathing, witnessing, being. And that is not nothing. That is everything. The light is fading now. The day is ending. You can feel yourself sinking deeper, letting go, releasing the need to understand or solve or fix. You can just be here. Just be this. Just be. The elders are sitting somewhere, in memory, in imagination, in the space between what was and what might be. They are watching. They are witnessing. They are holding the space for you to rest, to let go, to simply be present in this moment without needing it to be anything other than what it is. You are seen. Not by the algorithms or the feeds or the endless machinery of validation, but by something older, something patient, something that has been watching since the beginning and will continue watching until the end. You are held, not by structures or institutions or the remnants of a world that no longer exists, but by the simple fact of being human, of being alive, of being part of this long, strange, beautiful story. You are enough. Right now, exactly as you are enough. The bench is gone, but you are here. And that is enough. Rest now. Let the day pass. Let the worries fade. Let the urgency dissolve into the quiet understanding that most things, in the end, resolve themselves, that most crises pass, that life continues, patient and unhurried, whether or not you are rushing. The elders knew this. They sat in this knowledge. They held it for you, and now you hold it for yourself. Not forever, not perfectly, but for now, for this moment, for this breath. This is enough. You are enough. Rest.